Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Many people try to find wonderful healing modalities when it comes to that dreaded word cancer, especially for people who actually have it and finding ways that they might be able to kind of ease the side effects of what this dreaded disease actually causes. Today on the Beyond 50 radio program today, I'm happy to say that there is something that I really haven't heard about out there when it comes to doing this very thing. Yoga for cancer. Can you imagine a yoga practice that you're able to ease the side effects that are tied with cancer and the practice sequences for varying stages of treatment and recovery? Well, that's exactly what our guest here today has done. Her book is Yoga for Cancer. It's a guide for managing side effects, boosting immunity, and improving recovery for cancer survivors. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Tara Prinster. Tara, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Daniel. Thank you for having me on your program.
Well, you're welcome for being on the program. I understand you sort of got started late a little bit with yoga, as I understand.
Well, in this day and age, I would consider starting at 50 is a little bit late.
Right, just a little bit late. Now, tell us how this all started for you.
The yoga or the cancer?
The yoga itself. Then we'll move into
the yoga itself. Well, that's a really good part of my story. It was 20 years ago when I turned 50, and I was going through all of the normal menopausal symptoms, and I didn't like that, having been an athlete all my life, and I was also not liking how my body was changing, and then I kind of looked around, and this was 20 years ago, so yoga was not quite on the scene as much as it is now these days. I noticed a few of my friends who did do yoga, the younger ones who were also dancers and just carried themselves very well. And I said, I want to look like that. And so I started doing yoga for what I always say, for all of the wrong reasons. I started doing yoga from the standpoint of vanity and also wanting to manage my growing old, my aging process. So that's how I got into the yoga. And then shortly thereafter, I got tapped on the shoulder by the big C. My yoga practice was pretty strong at that point, but when I had to sort of make accommodations in my life for things that I had not counted on and thought I was doing a pretty good job of avoiding, it came as a bit of a shock, and I found that as I continued doing my yoga, the side effects that I was experiencing from a very serious cancer seemed to be more manageable. And I must say, I wasn't doing yoga at that point for all of the meditative aspects of it that I include today, but I was doing it more for the physical aspects. I would return from a chemotherapy treatment and feel nothing but the urge to do some yoga to sort of what I would call detoxify my body from the chemicals that they were putting into it. And so, you know, that's sort of how the two became combined together. And as I continued post-treatments into my recovery process, I discovered a whole lot of other things that my yoga practice was doing for me, increasing my range of motion. I started looking at some of the side effects of chemotherapy and other cancer treatments which is serious bone loss. And I knew for a fact that yoga, being a weight-bearing exercise, would build bones in my body for all of the scientific reasons that we all know. So when I started looking at these sorts of things that yoga was doing for me naturally, I decided, let's take a closer look at this and find out why yoga is so helpful, provides all these benefits, And then how can I bring this information and this knowledge to others? Is one of the things that does happen when you are finished with your cancer treatments is that the medical community sort of gives you a big smile, shakes your hand, and says, you're done. We're finished with you. And what I really wanted was somebody to put something in my hand to say, here's a guide. Here's something that can be your companion. Now that we are, have done everything we can for you, here's something you can do for yourself. So that's why I wrote my book, Yoga for Cancer.
Now, when you started doing this practice, how were your doctors looking on this?
Oh,
what were their attitudes
excellent.
For the most part?
So my cancer was diagnosed 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And as the yoga world has changed in the past 20 years, so has the world of cancer. At that time, it was pretty much not considered a something that doctors paid much attention to, or oncologists. There was not any research connected with alternative healing through yoga at that time, or at least there wasn't much of it, if there was at all. And so when I asked them, and no one said, well, I don't see any reason why not, but I don't see any reason, that it can be of any benefit. So sure, go ahead and do it. And I wasn't given any indication one way or the other. It was actually sort of a non-interest. Whereas I think today, with the research that is happening in the cancer world, and are looking, and researchers and oncologists and doctors in general, looking at the benefits of these alternative methods of managing our body as well as healing our body, that they are beginning to see the benefits. And I think that the reaction is much different 14 years later, that it's much more accepted and encouraged, in fact. And this is another reason why I'm so pleased to have my book on the market, because still there is not something oncologists can hand to a patient once they have completed treatment to say, look, I've done all I can for you, and now it's your turn to keep yourself healthy and strong, keep that immune system working in order to avoid a recurrence. So here's a book that gives you some hints what to do and the reasons why they will help you.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have also worked with other people who have had pretty interesting results as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
As I understand it, there was somebody who actually called you the Yoda in a tank top. Wow.
Yeah, well, I've set up many classes here in New York City where I live, and also have been a leader of many retreats for cancer patients and survivors all around the country. And so this daily working with other people, they see me in my body and how I use the yoga. And I listen to and watch their stories as well. It's always amazing to me and delightful to me to see someone come to their first yoga class full of fear and anxiety and just looking for hope and ways to bring themselves back to full recovery, or to find the body that they used to have, particularly with breast cancer survivors, or just looking for a companion or a community that will keep them strong and supported as they continue on their path to recovery. So yes, I work with lots of people, as well as lots of yoga teachers, in helping them understand how yoga is healing, the science behind yoga, the science behind the methodology that I include in my book, which is, I like to say that yoga is as scientific as it is spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
It has certainly a strong reputation as being a relaxation tool, as a spiritual healing tool, as a meditative tool. But there is, on a cellular level, science behind not only the meditation, but also the physical poses and the physical asanas that we do.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say that there is scientific, insight to this here. I think one of the challenges, at least for me as I've been doing this program for quite a long time, is this, that a lot of times people will say that something is scientific to put it into a light that actually validates it. Now, I take a look at what you have here. Yoga has been around for centuries. And there is no doubt that through those centuries, it has had what you could call a shelf life that is extended beyond the scientific realm for many, many, many people who have done this practice, who have had tremendous benefits when it comes to their health. Okay, there's just no doubt about it. You couldn't probably fill enough books that shows that this is true. And I think really the troubling part about throwing science in there, and this isn't to undermine what you just said, it's actually to throw it up into the light, into the right place here, is that if there isn't a scientific sort of label of approval, so to speak, then it isn't valid. It just doesn't make sense. It's kind of pushed to the side. And I wonder why we place science in such high esteem, for something, especially like yoga.
Well, I love your question, and I appreciate the challenge. And I'm going to sort of turn it around on you and challenge back, because I think it is when something is not challenged, either on scientific, from a scientific approach, or just on a belief system, then we don't have answers to anything. If I just tell someone, oh, just do it because it'll make you feel good, and which I was told when I first started doing yoga, this is good because it works on your energy center for opening your heart, or where you might have trouble thinking or managing this. Just open up your mind in that place, or open up this part of your body, and it will heal. And I did that. I did it, and it worked. But I still ask the question, why? Why does that work? Why does that make me feel better? Why is it when I breathe in a certain way and find it easier to move and breathe in a certain way, that the movement becomes easier, and those blockages that I am feeling do actually go away? Why is that? What's happening here? So, I like seeing the science behind it. And I'll say also in support of that, when I say to my students, here's something that you can do for yourself that is going to keep your immune system strong. They all know how important that is in terms of avoiding a recurrence. And when I tell them that, just a certain kind of breathing is going to create movement of the lymph fluids in their body, and keeping those lymph fluids moving is everything about avoiding a recurrence and keeping the immune system strong. They light up and say, oh, okay, it might sound a little bit like science, but it really is all about yoga.
Mm-hmm. Now,
that's what yoga is.
Right. And I love that you actually approached this and you wanted to understand the science behind it. That's the one thing. What I was suggesting is that sometimes people will try to use science as a shield to avoid exploring the possibility of what seems to be the unknown. That's what I really meant. You know, to a point, do you see what I was talking about? And I think maybe I posed that question in a way that kind of threw it in a different direction. I love science, you know, the science of actually going out and taking a look at exploring the unknown to understand it. That makes a lot of sense. Science also, when used in its practice to see if you can get repeatable results. For instance, when you do certain chemical combinations, you should have this outcome. It's a scientific fact. But when they use the word, or when the word of science is used loosely to prevent someone from exploring the unknown, or to try to give people reasons for not wanting to do something that's unfamiliar, that's where I have trouble with science the way it's used this day and age in the conversation. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, but that is also one of the areas in why it's there is so much unconclusive research in and around such things as yoga or alternative healing modalities, because to actually structure a scientific research based on you know, someone's interpretation of how they are feeling just doesn't become quantifiable. So it's very difficult to research these unknowns in and around something as seemingly individualized as say a yoga practice would be. But to another point too about science and the unknowns. I mean, everything about, that's why we do science.
Right.
It's because we don't know, and we don't know whether these things are true or not true. Applying scientific methodology to something like yoga is so difficult. Because it is so individually perceived. You know, we can't construct a Western-style research model in and around, 100 people with cancer. Everybody's cancer is different, and put them all in the same yoga class. Everybody's experience in that same yoga class is going to be different. So it's almost impossible to measure these things. So it falls further into the category of unknowns. And but still, science is all about asking those questions about the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've worked with many people using yoga for cancer. Tell us about what your experience was with people, how you've seen, for instance, symptoms turn around or become more manageable.
Perhaps some of the best examples would be breast cancer survivors. One of the kinds of cancers that leaves someone with relatively disfigured body. And along with that come lifelong side effects of lack of mobility, in particularly the arms due to the surgeries. So I see immediately, because the methodology, the Y4C methodology that I've constructed, deals with those specific loss of mobility directly, and I've constructed many sequences to help refocus the attention on other muscle groups to improve that kind of mobility. Also, with various kinds of cancer come the removal of lymph nodes, which leaves someone at risk of lymphedema. And my methodology explains, first of all, what lymphedema is, which I will do now, which is the swelling in an area that has had lymph nodes removed because of the buildup of lymphatic fluids. And as I just said earlier, what we need to do in terms of keeping our immune system strong is to keep that lymph fluid moving throughout our body so that it is disposed of rather than staying stagnant in a particular area. So we use very simple yoga asanas and sequence to do that, but explain what's actually happening so that they can experience not only the relief of the lymphedema, but have a tool to actually do it for themselves when they're at home and not necessarily in a class. So this knowledge of what they are doing and how the benefit is given to them is almost, it's immediate. I will have people come and tell me, what you told me was so powerful, and I'm doing it. And look, I'm not wearing my lymphedema sleeves anymore. Perhaps some of the most less physical ways of using yoga as a more of a mind-body tool in terms of focusing and settling the mind and using pranayama, breathing exercises, is demonstratable when I talk about how to do this when one is feeling anxiety about having an MRI or visiting a doctor for a checkup. And I had one woman come to me and said, I wanted to just tell you that yesterday when I was in that MRI machine, I remembered your voice saying to me, now just watch your breath. Just watch the in-breath come in and let the out-breath out as slow as possible. And sure enough, she said, the claustrophobia I was feeling in that machine went away, and I got through it. So this is some of the kinds of things that I see and I hear my students bring back to me, not only how that's physically changed their bodies from day to day and week to week in classes, but also how that's taken it away into their lives to really make a difference and help them as a tool, as a companion to the rest of their lives, long after the treatments are finished.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know what's fascinating is I was reading in your book that there's a T-shirt that you like to wear that says, "Breathe deeply and appreciate the moment." Now, I like this, and as you look through this book, Yoga for Cancer, first of all, it literally is, it's a guide for being able to do this, whether it's in your home or where you may be, and it shows illustrations and so forth. But when I read that and I started looking through the book to try to get a better feel for this, to share with the listening audience, what came to mind was something really interesting, and that was the discovery of the cure for cancer back in the early part of the 1900s by Otto Warburg. And his contention is the cure for cancer is trying to get oxygen into the cell, oxygenating the cell. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And when you take a look at what yoga brings, especially when you look at these poses that you have in here, there are certain poses where you look at it, says, at this point you need to exhale, and then at this point you need to inhale. And you look and realize, wow, this is kind of twisting in some ways and so forth and maybe contorting the body a little bit, where it squeezes a lot of it out and brings it back in some of the most unique ways. And it's really basically applying what Otto Warburg was talking about back then to allow you to get that oxygen deep into your body.
Oh, I would totally agree with you. I think that, as we know, as the research
I was
on
almost
cancer,
worried about you there for a minute. I thought you were going to hit me like you did with a science thing.
Oh, all right. Let me just say,
I knew
Daniel,
contorting was a strong word. I didn't want people to feel afraid, like, no, man, I can't twist into those positions. Are you crazy? But they really are very simple movements.
They're very simple, and that is the secret to it all. I think is the principles I define in there start with 1, breathing, and 2, movement, and then combining those in a methodology in a way that we do one thing on an inhale and we do another thing on an exhale, and there's a consistency with that. And I also want to slip this in here. I really appreciate the depth at which you have read my book to remember my T-shirt. That's very sweet. And I would say that yes, going back to getting more oxygen to the cell comes to what now in our 21st century we are seeing all of the science on cures for cancer, which I put in quotes. Anyway, curing cancer. I have a strong opinion about using that word. But in any case, treatments for cancer are based much more on a cellular level than they used to be. And coming down so deep into the cell is to look at the individual DNA of each person. And that is where we are finding that if there is a cure for cancer, it would be there. So yes, from the 19th century to the 21st century, we're getting very deep into the cell. Now, obviously, keeping cells healthy with a supply of oxygen is, sort of a no-brainer. I mean, deprived of an oxygen supply, we die. Our cells need oxygen. The process of bringing that oxygen into the cell is not as simple. It is a complicated process that involves many parts of the body, and in order to do that, those many parts of the body as a whole have to stay healthy. And so we need to practice that process of breathing to bring the oxygen in. Number 1, pranayama, breathing. And number 2, we need to keep all of those parts of the body that do that, such as the diaphragm, the supporting of our spine to keep upright, very critical. If we are humped over and slouched over and don't give space to our lungs so that they can fill with oxygen, if we lose the natural curves in our spine, which is something that happens very frequently, I'll use the example of breast cancer survivors again, when they lose their mobility to stretch their arms and they begin to sag forward with the weight of either newly constructed breasts or artificial breasts, they lose lung capacity. And so this is one of the other primary functions of the movement exercises that we start with in yoga, is using the breath to keep the spine as strong as it possibly can be so we can sit upright and breathe more of that oxygen into our lungs to feed those cells. Also, the breath movement process is also moving lymph. Breath itself, the diaphragm movement, moves lymph in and through our body. And the inversion processes that we use in yoga use the natural force of gravity to move lymph through our body. And all of those things, those two very simple things from yoga, inverting the body, breathing, support keeping the immune system strong and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer your question?
You did, because you're actually sharing where, what I want to say is this, is because you have been in yoga practice for quite a long time, you know, to me, I would think you have a deep sense of personal spirituality. And the reason of saying that, I remember years and years ago when I was actually interviewing someone who taught yoga classes, is, you know, I could see the benefits of being flexible with yoga and the strength that it could build, but I just, you know, couldn't really wrap my mind around what the purpose of yoga really was. And then as I was engaged in this wonderful conversation with this person, I began to get it, and that is that yoga, because of the positions that you especially what you have outlined here in your book, it really brings you in the moment. Because, for instance, if you're not flexible, like for instance, anybody who sits down to do stretches where you reach out to touch your toes and you feel the pain in the back of your legs because those muscles don't have the pliability that they did when you were a 5-year-old, for instance, that you feel that pain right there. That's where your mind is. It's right there, okay? And as I was, you know, reading and exploring your book here, I began to realize that you're definitely a spiritual person. You're very spiritual about this, trying to let people who read this, and they should also practice this, come to realize, where is your thinking? You know, how often are you really right here, right now, experiencing, you know, the moments that life is giving you? And most of us aren't. We're distracted, especially today more than ever. You know, I like to take public transportation when I go downtown. And I notice so many people tuned out, and they're on their iPhones and cell phones and playing games. They're somewhere other than here, you know. And I can't help but wonder at times, you know, and this is just one potential, I guess, way of looking at it, is that it's because of that you see cancer on such an increase, is because we found a way to become distracted and out of the moment and somewhere else. And I like this little passage, which I'm going to read here quickly from the book. Yoga teaches us that we are exactly where we are supposed to be. Now, that being said, it's interesting because a lot of people sometimes, as they get cancer, they shift into a victim mode as, this wasn't supposed to happen to me. Why me? You know, I don't get this. But the truly spiritual ones, and this is all of us, we all have this potential, but you were awakened to that particular question over time to say, sure, okay, if I'm supposed to be here, what is the message that I'm missing here? You know, and I thought, as you continue to read this part here, that it's an impossible idea to believe in when you are a cancer survivor, however, a beautiful idea to hold on to when the rest of the world wants you to, quote, get well soon. So people tend to feel very alone in something like this as well. That's got to be very daunting as a side effect in and of itself.
Yes, absolutely. I woke up this morning thinking I should have titled this book differently. And it's a funny thing to say, but and it does follow, I think, with where you're going there. It should have been yoga and cancer. Precisely to what you just said, I collect these metaphors connecting yoga and cancer, because I think that they have more in common than what it sounds horrifying to a lot of people well, in general, it sounds horrifying to a lot of people that yoga and cancer could have something in common. But it is exactly that. You said going into a yoga class where, you know, you're asked to, you know, bend over and you don't feel flexible and you get a pain in your lower back and you can't do these shapes and that, you know, some flexible teacher up there is asking you to do. Yoga can be very, very humbling, especially if it's poorly taught. And so can cancer. Cancer is extremely humbling. And so when they come together and we take the humbling aspect of yoga and put it into a place where it becomes manageable, being flexible is not a criteria to do yoga. You don't go to yoga. You go to yoga to maybe find a little bit of flexibility, but it is not for the purpose of being flexible. Mm-hmm. However, properly guided into some shapes, and then and properly guided to the place where your body can be in that shape, and then shown how to breathe there, which is the same thing with a cancer. When you start with the diagnosis and say, yeah, here you are, and we're going to start right from here. Mm-hmm. And we're going to manage it, and we're going to make sense of the chaos that it creates. The other commonality that yoga and cancer have is transformative. Taught well and properly to each individual, yoga can transform your life both physically and spiritually. Forced into a method that is questionable, or by a standard comparing to, the yogini next to you who can, get her foot behind her head. That's only not going to transform you. That's going to injure you.
Right.
And so yes, a yoga practice can change your mind, and it can change your body. It is for sure cancer is a wake-up call that changes your mind. Mm-hmm. It stops you in your tracks to think, oh yeah, okay, I did everything right, and I got it. Mm-hmm. So what do I do now? And also it changes your body. You have to do something about the cells in your body once you've been told that there are some cancer ones there. Mm-hmm. Because it's not like the flu. It's not like a cold. Take a couple aspirin and go to bed and it'll go away. It either needs treatment one way or the other. It needs attention. It needs to be managed. So, Daniel, you ask very good questions. You sure know how to make a person talk.
Well, for instance, I want our listeners to, they're probably sitting there thinking, well, I know yoga makes you feel healthy, but gee whiz, do you really think it could help with cancer? And I say, well, what are you doing otherwise? Okay. And here's a thought that came to mind. As you brought up this person, this yogi person who's sitting there and they're able to take their foot and put it behind their head. Okay, I can immediately think that people would be thinking, well, I can't do that, so why should I bother? The other thing, right, too, is just recently I had someone on the program who was a meditation coach. And she said one of the most interesting and most consistent questions she's had, and one of the biggest reasons people sometimes won't pursue, for instance, a meditation practice, which is really pretty simple. That's the beauty about it. And it's free, and you can have as much of it as you want. But she says that people just worry that they're not doing it right. And I can see that you probably ran into that sort of obstacle here with people who thought, okay, this sounds good. I mean, you've certainly presented even a scientific point of view that shows why it's viable, but gee whiz, I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing it right. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, in our Western minds, we want to always be doing something. And perhaps the verb do is the problem. I don't consider myself to do yoga. I practice yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I use it as physical and mental hygiene. Just as I would brush my teeth in the morning. It's not a do right or wrong. It's just something that is part of staying healthy and strong. Now, what I'm going to use this as an opportunity to switch the focus of yoga being, this particular book being yoga for cancer or someone who has cancer, someone who's been diagnosed with cancer, to say an outrageous thing, which is that we all have cancer. And by saying that, what I'm going to imply is that the reasons, the science that is articulated in the book of how yoga works on a cellular level to boost the immune system is what everybody needs to be doing anyway. Because we all have cancer cells in our body all the time. And that's why we have an immune system. We have an immune system in our body that is taking care of that constantly. And the things that are pointed out in the book in terms of methodology and in terms of science, in terms of breathing and moving, are all something we should all be doing to keep our immune system strong. And they are all accessible. If they're accessible to someone who is, being treated for cancer and undergoing, very serious, fatiguing treatments, and or going through a recovery process where their body has been, seriously compromised, if it can be helpful to them, then why wouldn't it be helpful to a normal, healthy person who wants to keep their immune system strong so they, too, can manage and avoid a cancer?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say is that the yoga is adaptable to everybody in some form or another. You find a practice that works for you. The book is set up so that someone can design their own practice.
Mm-hmm.
And take it from, as you pointed out, where you are right now. And it is to the point of making it something you do daily as hygiene, and not, to just go to the gym and do a set of, cardiovascular workout exercises, so it's the doing yoga that I find a little bit difficult. But what I try to do is to think of it as undoing.
Mm-hmm.
Yoga should undo all of those things that you are doing to yourself. What you are doing is slumping over and allowing yourself not capacity and space to breathe. What you are doing is developing a pain in your left hip because you are always got your right foot on the gas pedal and you're skewing your spine. A good yoga class with the right kind of teacher would guide you into finding a balance in your hips and help relieve some of that pain in your left hip. So it's undoing, not doing, that everyone should practice. It's undoing the habits that we've created over a lifetime that causes, aches and pains. Mm-hmm. It's the things that you are doing that we want to undo that would allow you to touch your toes without any pain in your lower back.
Now, there was a part in a survivor story that you had here in the book which really caught my attention, and that is, it says, for some of us, cancer is like a fast pass to enlightenment. What are your thoughts on that?
Repeat that again.
For some of us, cancer is like a fast pass to enlightenment.
Oh, a fast pass.
Pass. Okay. Like a pass to enlightenment.
Oh, pass. A fast pass. Okay. Right. I thought you said pass, like, pass the sugar,
it's a
pass
pass.
The ball.
That's
okay,
what it
okay,
says.
pass. Okay. Yeah, well, certainly in our hectic rushing around, that's what we do, don't we? We rush everywhere. I'm totally distracted on my computer. I've got so many screens open. We're so pulled in so many directions all the time that we don't want to, as a culture, to stop to think about the fact that we're not going to be around forever. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's difficult, even if one is a very spiritual person, to get rid of all of that noise, get rid of all the drunken monkeys in our environment, to think about, well, what if tomorrow the sun did not come up for me? So I think that's the path to enlightenment, is that is what it's all about. It is understanding that there's a beginning and there's an end. And no matter what you do, you can't avoid that. Now, does enlightenment mean that you are, going on to another life or living? Maybe, but it does not mean you're going to live forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, I found that particular piece in there eye-opening because I remember some years ago I had actually interviewed an author on a book that had to do with 4 women who were from 4 different religious belief backgrounds, and each one of them were at a different stage of cancer, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. And each and every one of them seemed to unanimously agree that they were now cancer initiates. In other words, this initiated them into a way of seeing and experiencing life that they hadn't experienced before, so they found it to be more of a blessing. It'd be a rare stretch to believe most people who, especially when they first hear a diagnosis of something as dreaded as cancer could be, to think of this as something that is a blessing. Was that way for you as well?
Well, it's a popular celebrity interpretation of cancer, as we see, as people have learned to come out of the closet and talk about their cancers, and so many celebrities have gotten it, and a blessing, a gift. I think that those are and the more that cancer has come out of the closet, and we now even talk about baby cancers, I find that so difficult because I can speak to one of my yoga students who has a baby cancer, and he or she may be so unable to get beyond that C word. And no one dies of a baby cancer. I know that's also a shocking thing to say, but one does not die of early-stage breast cancer. One dies of late-stage breast cancer, but not early. So when they're at various stages, the emotional ingredient is different depending upon the personality. What I do witness, and I can say this almost categorically, is what I do see in those who are diagnosed with late-stage cancers. A kind of peacefulness. But they are having to face that there is only, so many stages to a cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's called the end of the road. It's a disservice by the medical community, I think, to stage these things so that we can do the comparison. Everybody's cancer is their cancer and is a serious cancer. And everybody deals with it differently. I'm blessed to have had so many years post my cancer, and I fully intend to have more. Whether that was a blessing or a gift, I don't know, but it certainly was a wake-up call. It was a reboot of my system of thinking, and I'm very grateful to have it exposed me to so many other people, many who I've mentioned in the book, who have taught me the real lessons of what it is like to be a late-stage cancer, and also how to let go. And that's one of the other things that I'm going to bring back to this whole thing of finding the analogies between yoga and cancer. And yoga is a process of, letting go of feelings, of habits, of stress muscles. It's a very popular, concept within the yoga experience. And likewise, yoga teaches us that and ways to manage it. Cancer puts us face to face with letting go of that life force.
It's also a way, too, as you were describing in the book, of being able to accept the moment of discomfort, to actually go into it. Because there's no doubt that I'm sure you must have felt this way as you were originally or first diagnosed, that feeling of fear. Like, oh my goodness, what's next? And a lot of times people will run from that fear, or they'll find ways they can cope with it rather than going into it. And it's that thinking again. I know you keep bringing up the chattering drunken monkey, so to speak, but it's funny how often that's there.
Right. Well, fear is another one of those uncomfortable feelings that we don't like to deal with in our culture. I mean, who does? But, perhaps, once again, yoga teaches us how to look at the things that might seem kind of scary or we're afraid to do. I mean, I was afraid to, jump up and stand on my hands the first time. I still have fear about doing certain kinds of poses, which I know I can do. But it's an uncomfortable place to be. And what feels a whole lot better is being in a comfortable place, going down, into a room or down a hallway where we are not too sure where we're going, or getting up on stage and speaking when we are, have performance anxiety. It creates a lot of uncomfortable feeling. Let's take childbirth. How many times have I heard women say, they're so happy to be pregnant, but they're so afraid of, the labor. And anything with fear requires that we have to either deal with it or run away from it. And you could accomplish a whole lot more of understanding of yourself and getting to the other side of the fear by looking it straight in the eye and being realistic, and then walking through it, not around it, not under it, not over it, but through it.
And you would find that life is kinder than you think it is?
No. I think that life is about making sense of the chaos. It's about making sense and putting into balance the fears and the joys, the suffering and the sorrow. And that too is, I guess, one of the lessons that I learned from yoga, tricks to do that. And I applied it in facing the fear of cancer, and I try to teach those tricks to my students. But I know that there's really no way to avoid the anxiety that is going to come up every time you go for a checkup.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how far you are out, that little thought is going to come back to your head. It's a little companion. It's a little Buddha that's going to sit down next to you and say, "Okay, here we are again. This could go one way or the other, and I mean, you can avoid it or you can walk through it."
Mm-hmm. The book is Yoga for Cancer. Our guest joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program, Terry Prinster. Terry, is there a website our listeners can go and find out more?
Absolutely. It's very simple. The website is y4c.com, Yoga for Cancer, and that 4 is the number 4. So y4c.com.
y4c.com, and you can find out how you can get a hold of the book and start, kind of implementing yoga into your daily life, whether it's to help manage the symptoms that cancer can cause, or actually help with building the immunity, as you keep describing in the book, to allow the body to perhaps prevent from getting it in the first place. Very good stuff.
There you go.
It has you a lot in here thinking about a lot of things about your life. There's no doubt about that. Terry, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today.
You're welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions and for reading my book.
You betcha. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You can also find out more. Visit us at Beyond50Radio.com. That's the number 50. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.